Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
What up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. I'm Dan Casper. Don't forget to check out the Swag Cave. That link is in the podcast description. Swag Cave brought to you by Resonance Branding Company. Awesome episode coming at you. We're going to be chatting with Ian O'Connor, the New York Times bestselling author. His new book, Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers, is now out. Go pick yourself up a copy. It is a fantastic read here, so we're going to talk to Ian for a little bit about his book. Before that, though, I kind of wanted to give my review on the book here. And the best way I think I can describe this book without giving away anything, because I want you to read it. I think if you're a Packers fan or a football fan or such somebody that's been intrigued with Aaron Rodgers, it's a fantastic read. The best way I can describe it, it confirms, I think, a lot of the stuff that, we've heard over the years. And that's the thing with social media and the internet. You hear rumors, there's blogs, you don't know what's true. Everybody's got two sides of the story and such. But it confirms some of the stuff that we've heard. It goes into great detail about some of Aaron's some of the things that went on with Aaron's life, both private and professional, off the field and on the field, really. So it was a wave. I found myself reading this book and kind of going through different emotions and sort of thing. Like, at certain points I would be like, I'm rooting for Aaron, or like I'm on Aaron's side there, and then I'm like, oh, Aaron, why'd you do that? So it was like kind of the up and down waves of emotions, and Ian was able to talk to some of the family members for Aaron too, and you're like, it was kind of gripping, especially hearing some of the quotes from his grandma on there too. But it's a fascinating story with a fascinating individual, a unique and confusing individual in the world of sports. A guy that is going to go down as one of the most talented players of all time. One of the most talented players of all time, but maybe also has the title of the most confusing, most intriguing athletes of all time, because his life story is so... It's different than what we're accustomed to hearing, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think for a lot of Packers fans, too, we've seen Aaron Rodgers grow up in front of our eyes. I mean, I remember when he was drafted, I was in college, so we're kind of similar ages in that, and seeing his whole career play out. And, it started off, obviously not on a great note, because a lot of Packers fans wanted Brett Favre still. Then he comes on the scene, he wins a Super Bowl, right? He wins a Super Bowl. He seems like he's like really into, like, he looked like a fun-loving guy. He's doing episodes on The Office. He's doing, discount double checks and all that stuff. And then just felt like the last few years, things changed. Felt like the last few years, just his personality changed maybe, or he seemed like a different person. And Ian does a really good job in this book kind of going through all that, going through the timeline, if you will, of Aaron's life up until this point and the different things that have happened in his life and all that. So it's a really good read. It's an easy read. You kind of get sucked into it, and I think I got sucked into it a lot too, because we lived through that, right? It jogged a lot of the memories of some of the games and some of those seasons and such. So I got sucked into it, and Ian just did a fantastic job with all the research and all the interviews that he did with this book, including talking to Aaron with this book too. Even though it is an unauthorized biography, he did talk to Aaron a little bit here too. So, that's kind of my review. It's a fantastic read. I think it confirms a lot of stuff. It goes through kind of like waves of emotions, and I almost found myself picking sides. Like, okay, I'm on Aaron's side here, but then I'm like, no, I'm on his family side, or I'm on so-and-so side, that sort of thing. Best way I can describe it, though, too, is Aaron Rodgers is definitely a unique, confusing, complicated person. And that doesn't necessarily mean a negative thing either. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Ian O'Connor, the New York Times best-selling author, is joining us here this morning. His new book, Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers, released this week here. Ian, big thanks for joining us this morning, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us a little bit.
Hey, Dan, it's my pleasure.
Hey, we had a listener text in, Mark, a little bit earlier, I think it was yesterday, saying he went to Books A Million in town and went to purchase his copy, and he said the clerk there said it was flying off the shelves. So a lot of enthusiasm and excitement surrounding your new book.
That warms my heart, Dan, because Vince Lombardi coached at my high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up 8 houses away from where Lombardi lived in Englewood, New Jersey. And I always wanted to write a Packers book. I felt I had one inside of me. Because of the Lombardi legacy, and I finally got an opportunity through Aaron when he was traded into my backyard here in New York to do that. And so I'm glad to hear that. I've always been fascinated by the Packer mystique and Lambeau, and and Aaron, of course, is a very compelling figure. And I just from afar, I was always fascinated by him, the mystery of him. And what I wanted to do is paint a full and complete human portrait of him as not only an athlete, but a human being, and hopefully I pulled it off.
Absolutely. I mean, I had a chance to read it this past weekend, and it's so, I mean, it's awesome, man. And I've read your Belichick. We had you on with your Belichick book a couple years ago, too, so you do fantastic work. I got to ask you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, when you were writing this book, though, did it ever cross your mind that if you did this, that I may have to embrace what Aaron says about the book, because we've seen him be kind of critical about stuff in the media or about the media. And how important was that for you to have that sit down with him at his house?
I think it was very important, and I've said this earlier, but I handed in the manuscript without that. And I had been trying through the Jets and through his agent and directly to Aaron to get him to sit down with me. And I was getting non-responses and a whole lot of indifference. I sent him previous books I'd written about Coach K and Belichick, and I don't know if he ever looked at them, but yeah, I was trying everything, but I didn't give up, but I did have to hand in the manuscript, and then a couple weeks later, I got a message from the Jets saying, Aaron is now willing to see you. So I flew out from New Jersey to Los Angeles and drove to Malibu and had a bomb scare on the way. I got diverted to Chicago. That was not fun for 7-8 hours. But finally got to Malibu, and beautiful home right on the Pacific Ocean. We sat in his backyard on the ocean for 2 hours. I didn't know how much time he was going to give me because there was no time set by the Jets. And I thought if he doesn't like the line of questioning, he might kick me out of here after 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So I would have loved 15 hours with him, 20 hours to talk about his entire life. But it was really a fact-checking session after all the interviews I did, including with his parents. And his voice was very, very important. He definitely made it a better book without question. And since he didn't owe me a damn thing, as it's an unauthorized project, I really appreciate that he gave me those 2 hours.
How much did he appreciate the office coasters you gave him?
$14.99 on Amazon.com for those coasters. I thought he did seem to get a kick out of it, and he actually said he was going to put them out, which
nice.
I don't know if he ever did. But Woody Johnson gave him a better gift when the Jets recruited him back in, March of that year, 23, when they Woody brought, as a former UK ambassador, a jar of Queen Elizabeth's honey from Buckingham Palace. I think that was a better gift than the office coasters for $15. But he was willing to talk about the family estrangement, his mistake with COVID, the fact that he admitted making a mistake. Yeah, the fact that I was surprised by that. And I also appreciated the fact that, because Aaron doesn't admit too many mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's ever said the words "I'm sorry" in public. I can't remember. But he did say that when he said in that press conference in August of 21, "Yeah, I've been immunized," those 4 words really changed his entire life. That in retrospect, if he had a do-over, he would not have said those words and would have spoke his truth instead. And I was a little surprised that he conceded that.
Yeah. I mean, you've covered and researched a lot of the top names in the world of sports. We mentioned Belichick, your Coach K book. I believe you're working or plan on working on a LeBron James book coming up here, too. I mean, where does Rodgers rank on maybe your list of the most unique, interesting, or maybe the most confusing sports figures out there? Because I think for a lot of Packers fans, too, they look at this when he first came in. he seemed like a really likable guy under Brett Favre, maybe got unfair treatment from fans, and then, he's doing appearances on The Office, he's doing all this fun stuff, and it seemed like the last few years things kind of changed, and we got to know maybe a little bit more of his personality. Is he one of the most unique or confusing sports figures you've gotten to know over the years?
Maybe the most unique and confusing, yes, indeed. And Belichick was there too, but I actually think even though Belichick was a distant and mysterious character, there was a sameness about him. He was pretty much the same character throughout his entire coaching career, and that was a great challenge, though, studying him and his life and legacy. With Aaron, I actually thought he was more elusive, and I thought Aaron was considered one of the good guys in the NFL before COVID. People forget, media members were constantly praising him for stances he would take on social issues. He was considered one of the more socially aware athletes in the NFL and beyond, and supporting Kaepernick and so forth. And then to see his image completely go the other way with COVID, and then the conspiracy theories and the Jimmy Kimmel thing on top of it in the last 3-4 years, that did fascinate me, and I wanted to explore exactly how that happened and why it happened, and why Aaron in recent years has been so public in defending his positions, often unpopular positions. And it really seems like he has dug in his heels late in his career and decided that if you want to declare war on me, meaning the media, then I'm going to be a very willing participant in that war. So I think a lot of fans forget the way he was perceived before COVID. It was entirely different, and that was something that I definitely wanted to explore in this book.
Ian O'Connor, the author of the new book, Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers, joining us here this morning. And I think I asked you this when we chatted about your Belichick book a couple of years ago when it came out. And I know Chris Sims mentions in your book that Rodgers would have flourished in that Patriot system. But from a personality standpoint, how well do you think Rodgers and maybe Belichick would have meshed?
I think, Dan, they would have figured it out, right? Because Belichick has told people that he realizes Aaron's far more talented than Tom Brady. And I have to say, when I went back, and you certainly know better than me, and Packers fans know better than I do, but when I went back during my research and watched all these games in his prime and that championship run and the way he played against Atlanta in that divisional round, is how in the world did this guy win only one ring? Mm-hmm. It's Rodgers and Mahomes are, I think, by far the two most talented people to ever play that position. And if he had Belichick and he had the best offensive coordinator in the league like Brady did and McDaniels and the Patriot way system, there's just no way he has one ring. And so, now, would he have won 6 like Brady did? Well, he's more talented than Brady. I think there's no doubt about that. Brady might have had an intangible, or did have intangibles that Aaron didn't have, as far as imposing his will on situations and just forcing it into existence. I think against Tampa Bay in that NFC Championship game, 1st and goal at the 8, down 8 points, Tom Brady's going to find a way to get that ball in the end zone and get the 2-point conversion, even though he threw 3 interceptions that day and actually had a lousy game, and Aaron had to outplay him throughout. That's Tom Brady, and Aaron didn't gain a yard on those 3 plays, and LaFleur decided, of course, to kick the field goal. But I do think that Aaron has a chance here in New York, a great opportunity, if he wins a ring for a franchise that has not been to the Super Bowl since Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon for the first time. I think it could change his entire legacy and his historical standing in the sport, because winning a ring in New York for a franchise that has really been a Charlie Brown franchise, I think it would feel like 3 rings for his legacy, and I think that's why he took this opportunity.
You mentioned in your book a lot about the island. You don't want to be the island if you're, an Aaron Rodgers family member or friend, if you get sent to the island over there. And some former teammates, Greg Jennings and Jermichael Finley, I know you've talked about them, and they've been the last few years two probably more of the vocal former teammates of Aaron Rodgers, and brought up some issues about him. But then, you got the other side where others, like a James Jones or a Jordy Nelson don't really have anything negative to say about him. It doesn't seem like there's a middle ground really with some teammates about Aaron Rodgers. Why do you think there's some teammates like a Jennings or a Finley that may have some issues with Rodgers, but then, on the other side, like a David Bakhtiari too, for instance, one of their best friends, or they get along great?
Yeah, and Dan, actually, Jermichael Finley talked to me for the book, and he said, like, his son, who's a top prospect now, his favorite player is Aaron Rodgers. And they all said, like, they realized he was more talented than Brady, and they had the best quarterback in the league. Greg Jennings had a problem, of course, with what he said to Carlos Rogers, San Francisco defensive back, like, why don't you guys sign him? And he was really offended by that. And Aaron shouldn't have said that, because that's the kind of thing like Brett Favre would do to him. And it's the kind of thing that if somebody did to Aaron, he'd be the first one to really flip out over it. So that's not something he should have done to the guy who helped him. Really, I mean, Greg Jennings in the Super Bowl, the 2 touchdowns, he got blasted by Polamalu on one of them and held on. And then, of course, the third down pass that really helped them win that game late, because the Steelers had all the momentum and probably would have won that game if Greg didn't make that catch on 3rd and 10. So that was a mistake by Aaron. But overall, the one thing I found, Dan, that I was actually surprised by is it seems almost universal, with maybe those 2 exceptions, that players around the league in his 20-year career love the guy. And I did not expect to find that. I ran into a longtime NFL official who told me he had known hundreds of NFL players, and he said, I personally don't like Aaron Rodgers from afar. I don't like his positions on the vaccine, conspiracy theories, and other things. But I have to admit, I've never met an NFL player who doesn't like him. And my research, and even going back to his high school and junior college days, found that really it's almost 99% of his teammates really had positive things to say about him, and that did surprise me.
Interesting. Last question for you, because I know you got to get going here, but of all the different stories we've heard through reports or rumors the last 20 years of his career, was there a particular story or part of his life that you really wanted to find out more or really dig into?
I think the estrangement, Dan, because I have to say, when I told people I was working on this project, 9 out of 10, the first question was, what's the deal with his family? Mm-hmm. And so it was a very sensitive subject. Obviously, it's gone on, 10 years now, and there's not one defined reason or development or issue as to why it happened back in 2014. The parents and family members, of course, put a lot of blame at the feet of Olivia Munn, who he was dating at the time. He hasn't dated her in 7 years, and the estrangement continues. So I found there were 14 or 15 different issues, and a lot of them seemed minor and petty. Aaron did talk about it on the record to some degree. His parents talked about it to me on the record. I have a hopeful scene in the book. Last summer at Lake Tahoe, it's a celebrity golf tournament. Aaron plays in it every summer, and his father, Ed, put himself in the crowd, and he wanted to be seen by Aaron, and Aaron did see him on the 9th hole on Saturday, and he was debating whether or not to go over to him. And for some reason, he decided this was the day I'm going to say something to my father. After 9 years of never seeing him and never talking to him, he goes over, and Ed turned, and he sees Aaron 15 feet away, and he said, I froze because I forgot what that felt like, to have my son look at me in my presence. Aaron goes over, gives him a hug. They each said, I love you. It lasted 30 seconds. Ed was crying. Aaron went back to playing in the golf tournament, and there really wasn't a follow-up. But they both told me for the book that it was a very important, profound feeling and scene. And Aaron, for the first time since the estrangement started 10 years ago, said he wants to have a relationship with one of his family members, this being his father, Ed. And so let's hope that scene leads to more conversation and ultimately a reconciliation between father and son and then the rest of the family.
And Ian, I got to say that, reading your book, there was so many waves of emotions I was kind of going through. I felt like I was on Aaron's side at one moment, then another moment. I'm like, well, why would he do that? I mean, where you talked to his maternal grandma and the relationship that he had with his grandparents and how kind of heartbroken she was about, the lost relationship there too. It was a tidal wave of emotions kind of going through reading your book too.
Yeah, and listen, most American families have issues. I come from a big Irish Catholic family. We've had our share of issues, and these are extreme because it's gone on for 10 years, and it's with not exactly everybody in his family. He does talk to an uncle and a couple of cousins. So I did point that out in the book because everybody thought it was a clean sweep, and it's not quite that. But at the end of the day, if Aaron is saying publicly, I want a relationship with my father, and Ed Rodgers is saying publicly, I want a relationship with Aaron, that's where it should start. His father was his idol. Mm-hmm. Growing up, even in college, he said, listen, I wanted to be Joe Montana. I wanted to be Steve Young. But my idol is my father. That's the man I want to be. So I was hopeful this book, in a strange way, might help the process. I sure hope it doesn't hurt the process, because I would hate that as a human being and as a father. But I guess we'll find out in the coming months.
He's Ian O'Connor, the author of the new book, Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. Go get your copy in town, Books A Million, online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all that good stuff. Ian, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us. This is a fantastic book. I enjoyed it. I mean, I read it in just 2 days, which is probably the fastest I've ever read a book, including in college. So
Me too.
I appreciate it, Ian, so much, and congratulations on the book.
Hey, Dan, it was my pleasure and honor to be on. You did me a favor, and I appreciate it.
No problem. Hey, we'll hopefully talk to you soon, okay, sir?
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too. And that is going to do it for us on this episode of the Man Cave Podcast. Again, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. And don't forget to check out the Swag Cave, brought to you by Resonance Branding Company, the official swag provider for the podcast. A big thanks to author Ian O'Connor, again, for joining us and chatting about his new book, Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. Go grab your copy right now. It is a fantastic read. Until next time, I'm Dan Casper, and I will talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave Podcast.